Terry Finnegan Lynch, and welcome to Strike a Match. Thank you to Enlightenment Media for hosting and producing this podcast. We are partnering in this message of positivity. In the music world, there can be a lot of negativity, and the Enlightenment Media people are really empowering people to appreciate the value and the energy behind positivity and how it can so much influence your life for the better. And so we were partnering together to carry a message of positivity. I'm a life coach. Family Lifestyle Quest is my practice. I support families in the quest for health and happiness. And Strike a Match was an innovation of introducing the idea that if you took one small action, strike a match, you can light a flame within your heart to consider if the coaching world, the coaching model is something that would help you. For me particularly, I'm going to help your family. But the match piece of Strike a Match is that I introduce to you coaches from all over the country who have different practices and different emphases, different training, and they're here to introduce what they do in case this is a good fit for you, the match. Because one of the most valuable things about coaching is that it's about rapport. It's about connecting to a coach in a personal way. It's different than therapy and counseling, and all of those things are vital to our lives. We're not trying to replace that. We're an adjunct, an add-on to your health and happiness. So we're going to have a topic today about habits. So let's start off with a positive tip that you can hear on Enlightenment Radio. And we're bringing it here today to be the topic of discussion.
Positive tips for a better life with Terry Finnegan Lynch.
Did you know that it's your habits that determine the quality of your life? What if you decided to change just one habit for a better life? What would that be? And could you do that today? I'm a health and life coach, and these are Terry's positive tips for a better life.
WSME.
Habits are, sometimes they're bad, but what I determine with a bad habit is, has it stopped serving you, whatever you're doing? Does it not work in your life anymore? And the intention of coaches is to look at those habits that, are run the show, that are in and out of your day, that are causing you discomfort and harm and keeping you stuck. And the intention of working with a coach is to find a new way of looking at a habit and understanding why it's there. And I provide these fun facts because I don't want you to just rely on my word that this is what coaching does. INLP is a training center for coaches, and they did a survey of value-added truths about coaching, and one they came up with, I think it was number 23, is about bad habits. So eliminating bad habits. When bad habits are embedded in our day-to-day life, they diminish our ability to perform. So working with a coach will help you determine what these habits mean to you and how to up-level them. So we're not labeling the habit as such as making you a bad person. It just means that habit isn't serving your wellness. So I wanted to give a little background about habits. Like, what is it? So any thought or behavior that happens with any repetition becomes a habit. And why is that? Well, the brain is the reason why. Inside the brain are these neurons. And when a neuron generates a thought, it has all these barnacles, these extensions that go to all parts of our body and send a message to respond to the thought. So I'm going to go with a really simple thought. We'll reference the young man trying to quit smoking. So when you wake up and you say, I can't live without a cigarette, I'm having one right after my coffee. The brain says, oh, I can't live without a cigarette. That neuron anchors that thought and then sends all the messaging to your body that craves the cigarette, that takes the action of making sure you have them. And there's a physiological response to the thought. The interesting thing is, though, is the more you have the thought, the deeper the neural net becomes, like this house with the overgrown garden of roses. At one point, there were just a few blossoms, but the more you rely on an unwelcome thought, the stronger the entanglement of the emotion and the burden that it has, and it can overtake your life. So what we do in coaching is that we consider introducing a new thought. So a new thought, when it comes in to the brain, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to trigger a neuron to send a new message. If you repeat that message versus the old one, you design a new garden that inspires the life you deserve. So let's say that a little bit more slowly. If I wake up and say, wow, I'm so anxious, I'm really nervous about this day, I don't think I can do it, I'm going to have a response. And the more that I say that, the easier it is for me to believe that I can't do it, because the brain has filled up this space of neural nets and wiring that says I can't. So in coaching, along with a whole bunch of other tools, one of the instrumental ways of introducing change is to introduce a new thought. And this is what I say. I'm not responsible for my first thought. I am responsible for the first action. And that action is to say the opposite. So I'm laying in bed and anxiety overrules me. And before I put my feet on the ground, I say, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to go brush my teeth, have a glass of water, and then a cup of coffee. So what I've done is I've interrupted the first thought of being overpowered by anxiety with an action of saying the opposite, something positive. And now the brain has to follow that thought. Now, every time you go over and repeat the anxiety thought, you are invited to change your mind, to say something different. Because when we stop thinking I'm overpowered by anxiety, the brain's neural net weakens. And instead of being super, super strong and familiar, a new neural net is growing. So like the garden, if you plant flowers, they're going to grow. Are the flowers in your garden the ones you want? Or are you letting weeds take over? Because that will happen too. So like the garden in your backyard, and I'm not a gardener, I kill plants, but the concept is that the mind isn't stagnant. It isn't something that doesn't change. We literally can reformulate the brain with our own thoughts and intentions. Habits come from familiarity and the power of the neural net that's already established. But we can break it down faster than it grew with new thoughts. And that's how we create sustainable change, is we are diminishing the power, the connection of the original thought that doesn't serve us anymore, that is making us feel sick and sad and vulnerable and angry. We don't have to stay there. But what we do need to do is consistently introduce the more positive thoughts that you want. And what happens in coaching is we're not necessarily sure about what we want, right? Like if you, this is my puppy. If we're not sure about what we want, it's hard to create that positivity, right? So when you work with a coach, the big ask is, what do you want in your future? And it may be that you want to quit smoking, or it may be that you want to have a better relationship with your son. It may be that you want a different career. You may want your health to improve. But we get very specific about what that looks like. And then we create all kinds of tools and experiential exercises that create this new neural net for you to start practicing it. Darby, you have to sit down. I broke my toe playing with her the other day, so we aren't going for long walks. And so she's a little, isn't it walk time? I'm like, no. So sorry for the interruption. But Darby was actually one of the things that I did with my coach back in April a year ago. She asked me, what did I want? And I said, because I was depressed with COVID. It was awful. I said, I want to be running across that field on my 63rd birthday with my new dog. She's like, you want a dog? I'm like, yeah, I do. And within a week, I found a breeder. I wanted a doodle dog, and she was a breeder of double doodles. And Darby came into my life in June. But my coach helped me ask, what do I want? And the habit that I hadn't gotten into was, I'm sad, I'm depressed, I can't do this. Because even coaches will get there. That's why we have coaches. We can't take you very far if we're stuck in our stuff, So if your coach doesn't have a coach, ask why. So the way that habits work is that they serve us for a very long time. Whether it is, codependency is a habit, overeating is a habit, social media is a habit, and it serves us. We gain something from that habit. And what coaches invite us to do is to look at, is that really working anymore? What does this habit mean to me? What do I gain from it? And is that real or imagined? Am I really happy spending hours on social media? Am I really happy, isolating from friends and family because I'm afraid of COVID? There's lots of ways that we can hide in our habits and say that this is good for me. There's a lot of challenges coming out of the COVID crisis and into a new norm that we may not be comfortable with. We've changed lots of our patterns and our behaviors. I'll give you an example. My sponsor, I'm sober 18 years, and I've had Mary as my sponsor for 17 of them. And she got sick with COVID. She's 87 years old. And so she was out of my contact. And then she went to rehab, couldn't talk to her there. Then she went to New Jersey with her family, couldn't talk to her there. So almost 6 weeks went by without me talking to her when I had talked to her on a daily basis for years. 17 years, I talk with her nearly on a daily basis. And just in 6 weeks, that habit of calling her moved to the habit of not calling her. And then I didn't call her. And it was easy not to call her. And it took, like a real rattle in my cage to say, is this serving me not to talk to my beautiful friend? So these are very subtle, and the habits can happen in a short time. Darby, down. Having a coach, an advocate, aligning with your mood, your activities, your behaviors, your reactions to the world. So in my program, it's between 9 and 12 weeks. And that's a fair amount of time to watch patterns emerge as new ones, or certainly to see your old ones. And without judgment, we look at what is not serving you. We understand why. It's because there's a prominent thought in the brain, and there's a powerful neural net influencing the frequency and the familiarity and the access to that habit. So when we shift that and create a new idea, and we anchor it in the tools that coaches have to share with you. Habits that were prominent disappear, and new habits come in and replace them. It's very, when we make a decision, I'm going to lose weight, and I'm going to go on a diet, let's say, and we think we have to stop doing something. I have to stop eating ice cream. I have to stop doing this. But when we introduce something that you really like to support the new behavior, then you have real positivity to want to do it. And, a coach has to hold you accountable to that new behavior, because it's not easy to create the new pattern. That's my coaching model is based in 3 pillars: the right system, the right support, and the right accountability. So there is a model in coaching that is transformational, and we're very excited about offering that to you. That's why we're here, Strike a Match. So I'm really delighted about my next guest. She's quite unique from the coaches that I've invited already. She's a pediatrician. Miriam she's an MD, but she's trained in mindfulness, and she has this extraordinary program of teaching mindfulness in the classroom as well as in the individual world. And I'm really excited about how she's going to come to share her journey as a doctor and coach. So I'm going to share with you my cartoon for today. Here we go. Do you honestly expect me to get through the 4th grade without a life coach? Welcome to Coach's Comedy Corner, and this is my segue from my part of the show into our sponsorship break, and then into a beautiful conversation with Miriam. We'll see you soon. Welcome back. It seems like every time I listen to that break, I get this surge of emotion that I have been given this opportunity to have a podcast about coaching and positivity and change, and just bring a message each week that might be of use to you. I just feel so blessed. So thank you for being here and for listening in and watching if you're seeing this on YouTube. It is truly an honor. And so I always segue at this point to speak about rapport, that match. Finding a coach that you want to work with is really about, trusting and understanding each other and connection, right? So that it's important to find that match. The change won't happen if there is a lack of connection and confidence and fun in the process. So I'm introducing Miriam Mandel Md. Her website is called Exhale With Me. Wow, and it's beautiful. And she does reach out to a number of audiences, educators, business folks. I'm going to let her tell you all about it, because I'm delighted to bring her on board as a co-host today. So I'm really delighted to introduce Miriam Mandel Md, pediatrician, life coach, and now a beautiful friend of mine. Welcome to the show, Miriam.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So Strike a Match is about bringing coaches and innovators, influencers to our audience. And so you have a very curious platform of your journey of where you've been and what you're doing today. It's very forward thinking and influential. So tell us about how you went from pediatric medicine to where you are today.
Well, I've always loved working with kids. I've always loved teaching. So I actually was in college. I was actually a psychology major, and one of my closest friends was killed in a car accident, and that just changed my journey over to medicine. I don't even think the reason was really clear. It was just something I needed to do, and so I decided to go to medical school, and I practiced I was in private practice, and I was also teaching I was also a hospitalist in a local hospital here in Cleveland. And the progression was quite natural. I've always loved alternative medicine. I've always been interested in the mind-body connection. I always knew there was more to it than just giving medication, and I don't know. There was just something more. And I like to really explain by a lot of times when I introduce myself and people ask me how I got into this position, I like to explain how my last patient was kind of what pushed me to explore this a little more. And my last patient was probably about 13 years ago. And I was in the hospital, and a little boy came in the middle of the night with a large family. And he came in with a twisted gut. Basically, his intestines were twisted. He was in a severe pain. And instead of of course, I had to ask the regular questions, birth history, medical history, all that stuff. But I was always asking different questions that I found most doctors weren't asking. And it even really wasn't something you could discuss with other doctors. I mean, there was kind of a stigma to it. So I kind of kept it to myself, but I was asking quite a bit that, what's going on in this little boy's life that is really manifesting this disease in him, this condition in him. And then I met his family, and literally within 3 minutes, I myself had a stomach ache, and it was an extended family. It was a divorced family, and it was two grandparents actually that were fighting. And this one telling me and pulling me aside and saying not to give information to this one. And it was awful. Like, it was awful for me. So I can imagine what's going on in this little boy's internal world, right? So at that point, it was the last time I went back to work at that hospital. And I realized that I really wanted to help on a different level. I wanted to help at a level that would prevent some of these things from happening instead of fixing it afterwards. And that was always my goal, to give these kids, not even so much, ultimately it's for the kids. At 5, it's a little difficult because they're so little, but teaching the parents, teaching staff in school, what is going on developmentally with these little kids' brains. And once the kids get a little bit older, really helping empower them. And I found that a good way to do that is through the adults that are really in their life full time. So,
well, it's fascinating that you've channeled this through education with leaders of the schools, the superintendents, principals, and stuff, and giving this access to the teachers to understand their students and what they're going through, because the science behind, as I kind of alluded to at the beginning of the show, that what we create in our mind, in thought and response to the world resonates in our body, right? And
absolutely.
So it has nowhere else to go. So to be an influencer of giving teachers the opportunity to not only, be aware of what might be going on, but to also influence change is so healing for them. They must feel so great as teachers to have another tool to support kids.
It's just another avenue. And the one thing that I love about working with teachers is generally, especially the little kid teachers, elementary school and the lower schools, is that they're just so creative. So I find that working with the schools and the school districts, my job, especially like you just said, like we were talking about how like somebody's environment is so important, and to be able to support the environment for their well-being, their external environment, not even so much it's the way their internal environment kind of perceives the external environment. And there's something now called epigenetics, which a lot of people don't know. They don't know so much about this in schools. And basically what it's saying is that our environment is really what's controlling our health and well-being. So if we are able to control some of the emotions, the mental, the emotions and the internal environment, that we have so much more control than most people are thought to believe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're trained. Obviously, we're trained very, very differently. I'm a nurse and left nursing for a very similar reason, unable to help the people that were revolving doors of cardiology patients, and being terribly saddened by what the burden that they were carrying, and my inability as a nurse to change, other than being an empath to their situation. Right. So I trained in health and life coaching, and what the epigenetics, is that the
epigenetics?
Right? Yeah, epigenetics. Vocabulary is not my strength, so you should see me trying to get through pharmacology in college. I can't spell and I can't pronounce, so it was really a battle. But in my model of coaching, it's what I refer to as ecology, love, safety, and belonging. Mm-hmm. And if any of those three things are disrupted, then the ability for someone to change anything is really challenging, because the insecurity of anything different is too great a risk. So there are these components that, when we're out there in the world as individuals and we think, okay, I have to change this, I'm always angry, or I fly off the handle, or whatever it might be, that seems like a bad habit. There's so much root beneath it that affects our health, our life, and the environment is what threatens that love, safety, and belonging. Often, whether it be our internal family, or toxicities in our environment, or politics. There's a lot of things that threaten us. So,
and there's a lot of things that we actually have control over. Like, bringing up politics is a good example. It's how much time are you in front of the television? Not you in particular, but to ask yourself, how much time are you exposing yourself to negativity? How much time are you exposing yourself to things that really don't make you feel good? Like, I know you brought this up a little bit about social media, and that's one thing I like to ask the older kids. I'll ask them, and if they're honest, sometimes it's hard for them, but I'll ask them, like, really, when you come off of social media, or where you're and you're on it and you're conscious and you come off it, like, ask yourself, how do you feel? Like, how really do you feel when you come off that, that platform? And if they're being honest, most of the time they're not feeling great, and they don't even realize it, because it's such a habit. It's just their norm. Right. Or watching the news, it's like you get like an adrenaline rush. I mean, those chemicals are addicting. They're physically addicting.
It was interesting, because one of the things that would drive me crazy as a third shift nurse is the TVs. Mm-hmm. 3 channels, all of them news, or stupid game shows, or some violent show, whatever. And I would go in and I would turn them off without asking permission of the patient, and they would yell at me.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
And because they needed it, and I'm like, you're sleeping.
Right.
And what I began to see was that if horror they were watching on television, their life wasn't as bad as that.
Yeah.
They were okay with how bad their life was.
Well, that's the whole, you could have a whole dialogue about gossip, right? And about the,
Right.
like the National Enquirer or People magazine, like, you see people getting divorced or you see all these tragedies and then it makes you feel good about yourself. But that's false. That's just a false story. It's not, there's a much better and easier way that's sustainable. That's not sustainable.
So let's move off of the tragic way that people respond to this world and talk about what we do. So tell me more about how you influence the schools and how you actually got these leaders to say yes to you. I'm very curious about that.
I found that the people that come to me, it's usually somebody that I've worked with in the school as an individual client, or I've done a workshop, like a Zoom workshop. I did a lot of Zoom this past year. And so they'll go and speak to their superintendent or speak to their principal and say, we have PD, we have the money, we have the funding for social emotional learning. Can we bring her in? Mm-hmm. And usually that's the way that I'll get really good schools, meaning good in the respect of that they're consistent and they immerse their staff in it and they give it a chance. They practice it. And they're serious about it. They're not just dabblers. Like I do workshops, like I'll do like a regular, an hour workshop on say sleep or things like that, mindfulness. And that's great, but there's only a limited amount of things that's going to really change. If schools that really want change are going to stick with it for a while and they're going to practice, and that's where you start seeing the results.
Right. So what did you think? What did you think of my little cartoon?
That's kind of like how it's funny. That's funny.
But it's the Coach's Comedy Corner is meant to bring levity to the invitation that coaching is a good thing, and we wherever the resistance is, we want to make fun, we want to poke fun at that resistance and
bring awareness, right? Bring awareness to it, because I think that's probably the biggest issue is that people aren't aware of their destructive habits, and until it's pointed out and shown that it doesn't have to be that way, and they actually can feel better. They have the power, they have the control to make a different choice. Make a different habit. It's not easy, but it's not easy, but it's definitely doable. So setting that intention, like you were talking about, even like with a diet, it's like you have to be able to, you have to really do this for yourself. It's not something that you can come into being, kicking and screaming. It's an intention that you have to set, and use your willpower to and that intention to make it a commitment. And then bringing a coach in really just emphasizes and holds you accountable for what it is and keeps going back to what it is that you want, not what the coach wants, but what it is that you stated you want and keeping you on that path.
Yeah, I think my favorite thing about working with habit change is having people discover the positive intention of a bad habit.
Yeah.
Because that intention is what makes it so desirable. And it may be a false positive. Or it could be real or imagined, so when we get there, because everything has a positive intention, and they're like, no, it doesn't. You got to go deeper because you're not going to relinquish that habit if you're not aware of the positive intention it creates. Right. So if we find out what that positive intention is, keeps me safe, or it keeps me away from people that I don't want to be around because I'm snappy and whatever. Then we can say, okay, now we know why that's your go-to. And now let's see what you would really rather have and open that conversation up. And, the coach is not going to fill in the blanks, but the coach is going to hold space for you to ask and to get into that inquiry about the curiosity about what do you want. And so what you're doing with these, giving knowledge to these teachers is they're now doing this at the, in the classroom. And that influence is so great. thank you so much for, taking that, that combination of your loves, love of teaching, love of medicine, love of coaching, and just bringing them all together. Your website, I love. It's Exhale With Me. Is that right? Exhale With Me. Beautiful, beautiful site. Please, people, visit exhalewithme.com and experience this fresh invitation. What did you say? You are the greatest project you will ever work on.
That was my quote. That was it is a quote from, not from me personally.
Yes.
But I also do have some free resources on there too. If you were to click under inspirations, there are some.
Yeah, that's great.
Kind of like a mini blog, but there are some, some free resources.
So when you reach out to these superintendents and stuff, what's the biggest reason that they say yes?
First of all, they're usually generally very open-minded people in general. I've found they have kids of their own and they know that something's not working. Not that I think there's anything wrong with being desperate, because I think being desperate actually is such a great catalyst for change. And I think COVID caused some people, because things are going or have picked up quite a bit since COVID. And I think that it's because so many school districts were in such a desperate place that people just didn't know what to do. And they're seeing that things are they were falling apart. They were just getting at the stress on teachers. God bless them. I don't know how they did it and continued to do it. I mean, luckily where I live, things are really starting to get back to a little bit more sense of normalcy. But for a while, some of these kids are still online. My kids were lucky. They went back a long time ago. Yeah. But it's sometimes kind of comes down to being desperate and things just aren't working. And they want to try something new.
So I love to speak about like testimonials, like is there a school district that came back to you and said, oh my gosh, this has had such an impact. Can you relate to a story like that for us?
Yeah, I worked with some third graders pretty consistently all year. We did 2 15-minute sessions a week. And at the beginning, there are a lot of very active kids. There are kids that are just, it really is difficult for them to sit. And at the beginning, it was quite maddening, but then they started to realize, at this time, the lights would go down, they would take off their shoes, they would get their sitting cushion. And the change was just phenomenal. I mean, people that were staunch non-believers in any of this were like, oh my gosh, like they couldn't believe, honestly, like I couldn't believe some of the changes with some of these kids. And some of these children's parents came back to me and said, my son was always so scared in baseball to get up there and take his turn at the bat, and the pressure that he was under, and started to, he would start to use his mindfulness during that time. And it really helped him.
These are third graders.
Third graders. That was a third grader. There's another, in the same class, there was another little girl that when I happened to be in the classroom teaching, she had a grand mal seizure.
Oh, wow.
And and it was brief, but when she came to, she had to go to the hospital, and there was a brief period of time at the hospital where she was by herself on a gurney in the hallway, and she was fine. And, she came back the next day to school. She was fine. But she said to me, I get goosebumps just thinking about it, but something so little, but this is so important, that she was able to calm herself with her breath, when she was so scared there by herself. And even though it was only briefly, she was by herself, she was able to use what she learned in the classroom to really calm herself during that time when she was alone. And to me, like, there's nothing better than that, or when a teenager will call me and say, Dr. Mandel, like, I know I asked to speak about this, but I figured it out myself. I use that, the intention technique, and I know what to do. And so I don't need to speak to you. And
yeah,
the best, right?
That's incredible. So you're working in the classrooms directly in your?
Sometimes I work with I do work with some gifted kids at a different school district in middle school. I work with gifted children. I love doing PD. That's probably my favorite, is working with the staff and working with parents. I do parent workshops to keep the parents up to date on what the kids are learning in the classroom. So everyone's on the same page. Everybody has a similar vocabulary.
Right.
And it works that way. It works the best that way. A little bit, just working with the kids it's not really going to help.
No, I agree with that, that principle. It's why I'm a family coach myself, because no one person is the problem or the solution.
No, never. It's never, right. And I think it's so important for kids to know that they're not the problem. They're just not. They're not. And they have the energy of the house and the environment. Yeah.
I'm launching my practice. It's been a year, but I renamed it, and but I believe that the work that I've done so far this year, as small as it is, I'm now going on an online program, which I'm really excited about. It's a hybrid, so you'll be with me, but you won't physically be with me. But the families, I coached a young girl in her 20s, and after her last session, she says, "Can I bring my mom next time?" And the mom hired me, and because the truth is that Gianna is not the problem, but she solved her problems, and now the mother saw that freedom, and it's like,
Isn't that great? Isn't that great?
It's incredible. And
how closer they get as a family unit. It's amazing.
So I love the fact that there's this common intention that we have, you and I. Obviously a different focus. You have different skills than I do, but what we get to do is put the pebble in the water and watch it expand, because every family that heals makes the world a better place, and more positivity for everyone to share and experience together. And so the gift that SM Enlightenment Media has given me is the opportunity to meet all these new coaches. I had my friends on at the beginning of the show's episodes, and then I had to go find new people. And so it's been a real great experience to find influencers that I can aspire to as a coach and an entrepreneur, to make a difference and help the footprint become one of health and positivity. So it's been quite an opportunity for me, and I so appreciate that you said yes to share your time, and hearing the stories of little ones and teenagers, and believing that and experiencing greater skills to be healthier and happier is brilliant. So thank you so much.
I'm so grateful, really, for what you do. And I love following you on LinkedIn, even though I know you say it's not your biggest platform, but I enjoy LinkedIn. So that's what I'm.
Yeah, no, it's me trying to balance my social media, because I get all crazy about my posts have to be perfect. Oh, really? Is that half of yours, Terry? Wonderful to end with a chuckle. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to our audience for staying through the show to the last minute. And thank you to the great Doc P for producing this broadcast and giving us the opportunity to have this conversation together. So thank you, Miriam. And thank you, audience. And be safe, be well, be positive.